This is Donna with More Than a Review, and I am very excited to be here with Ruth today. We are going to talk about her story. It's Unborn, Untold, and they're true stories of women, even men, and a grandmother who have shared their stories about abortion and then how it impacted their lives and how they want to share what they've went through with others. And so Ruth, let's start with letting you kind of tell your story and then what led you to write the book and share.
Well, as I have shared with so many, I think the seeds were planted many years ago in my heart, probably starting around 16 when my mother had come home on Wednesday afternoons. That was abortion clinic day at the hospital in our community. And her job at the end of Wednesdays was to collect the fetuses. And she would come home, and I can see that red velour, old-fashioned armchair, and she would just sit in it. And the grief that came through her, it really impacted me as a 16-year-old. Then flipped through many years, and we had a family. I married my husband Bob, and we had 3 beautiful children. We always wanted 4, Donna, but we wanted them in the same decade. And when they didn't come, we thought we were finished, and then surprise, well, maybe shock is a better word. And we had a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 8-year-old, and I was ready to go back teaching, and thought I was in menopause, and lo and behold, those same emotions and hormones apparently are pregnancy signs as well. I hadn't learned in the first 3, I guess. And so when we went for some testing because of my age and some other concerns, we went to a beautiful hospital in Ontario, Canada. And in that beautiful, pristine hospital where we learn to trust that those are people that love us and want to carry on the life that is within us. We went there because we wanted to be in the right place when our baby was born. Should there be any problem, heart, lungs, and so on. And whether he didn't know or not, we are not quite sure, but in that conversation with the doctor and my husband and I, he offered us an abortion. Asked us if we wanted to continue the pregnancy. On 2 occasions, my husband later told me that he offered us twice. I went home really grieved, and the questions that came to my mind, Donna, were, is it this easy? What would I have done if my husband hadn't been sitting beside me? What if I didn't have anybody that would support and love this child? What do women do that are there and they're already in a hormonal state? They're not capable of making a good decision. None of us are in those states. And my heart started really feeling, I was changed in my attitude toward abortion because of that experience. And I began to have incredible compassion because I honestly wasn't sure I could have made the right decision in different circumstances. I'm a good Christian. I wanted to be able to make that decision. And all of a sudden I was faced with the fact, under different circumstances, what would I have done? And so that compassion opened up. And then this January 8th, 2019, our 13th grandchild was born to the son who we were asked whether or not we would continue his pregnancy. And I began to see the generational effect of choosing life. God loves the generations, Donna. From generation to generation, choosing life. What a powerful statement. And so that I went home from holding that little guy. He was only 4 hours old, and I started waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I knew that the woman that had said, please tell my story. I'm too old, nobody knows that I had 2 abortions. I knew that it was time to tell her story. And then from then on, it was as if God just moved in and he prepared these hearts of these people that were ready to tell their story and share it with the world. That no matter what you've done, no matter the pit, no matter the lies you've believed about that fetus, that baby in your womb, God could restore and heal. And his word has done that in all those stories.
Wow. So what led you to include men? Because most people don't even think about them in the story of abortion.
For me, they're the forgotten ones often. And in the senior that said to me, please tell my story, the continuation of her story was that she had totally broken her fiance's heart with 2 abortions of his babies. And he wanted them desperately, and she did not at that point. And many years later, she discovered, the Lord showed her that she had sinned greatly against him as well as against God. And they parted ways, and she never saw him again. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Somebody that you wanted to marry. And so when I reread her story, which was in my file for over 15 years, I reread her story and I thought, the men are so forgotten. That man knows he has 2 babies that he's never seen yet. I pray he's a born-again Christian, so he does someday.
Yeah.
But that made me understand, let's get some men in there to tell their stories, because they hurt too.
Wow. So what would be some advice if we have listeners who have either had an abortion and are dealing with that, or they know someone is, like any advice you would give them to kind of start that healing process?
Well, the great thing about Unborn, Untold is that we do have an OBGYN who's written the foreword, so he has some really good advice. We also conclude the book with a chapter from a psychologist who has done a whole chapter on emotional healing after abortion.
Very good.
And so those are 2 key elements at the beginning and the end of the book. But every story contains some personal suggestions of what they went. And they're not really written as suggestions, they're just part of their story and what they did to bring them to the place where they were willing to write their stories, because there has to be healing to write your story, to have that going around the world.
Exactly. Exactly.
One woman, I'll tell you, she found out in her 70s that she had a brother that was aborted when she was 7 years old. And so that story is very, very powerful, how she led her parents who had participated in this, and how she led them to the Lord in their 90s after they told her this story.
Wow.
It was just such a powerful story. Again, God's redeeming grace. This mother and daughter relationship was very broken because of that abortion, that the mother just didn't want anything to do with Jesus. But when she heard about how much God loved her and loved that baby, and that he was holding that baby, and so God's redeeming grace and his salvation is in the book. I didn't know when I started that book that God would weave in his plan of salvation, but it comes through because some people found Christ through their stories.
So that's what I was going to ask too. Was there anything surprising to you as you kind of were putting the stories together and meeting the people?
Very much so. You know, there are some reservations, that there are some reasons for abortion. As Christians, we even have a little category. I call it the 5%, because statistically, Canada and the US, statistically, 5% of abortions include mother's health, incest, and rape. And those 3 things are covered by the stories. In a very powerful way. And so again, it was very surprising, because it was not my intent. My intent was to get my own story out of how my mind was changed towards people that had had abortions. Abortion is wrong, it's murder, but we have to come back and say, how have we contributed? Have I opened my home to a pregnant teen? How have I made a difference? And I'm praying that this story. One story in there is a gal that was on the street on drugs and alcohol. She'd already had her first abortion. And then a woman in Ajax, Ontario, reached out, brought her into her home when she was pregnant for the 2nd time, and housed her, fed her, taught her skills, and now she's a pro-life advocate. Her story is in there. I can't wait to take her on the road with me, because it's such a powerful story of the other side. The other side of someone who made a difference in not only the life of the baby, but in the life of the mother. She's now restored. drug-free, alcohol-free, and sharing her story and thanking God for the life she has.
And just and changing the whole direction of her life,
Oh.
her generations.
But there's that other part. What can we do
Yeah,
as women and men to change the narrative in our countries?
that is amazing. Again, let me share the book. I will have links to it in the blog post, and you can also check out her Facebook page. But just some amazing stories for you to just understand, having your mind open to understand what these women have been through, and just understanding God's healing grace. That's amazing. Ruth, thank you so much for sharing.
It's been a delight to share with you, Donna. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.